The morning sun had barely risen when the city awoke to the noise of another day. Horns, hurried footsteps, vendors calling out their deals, the usual rhythm of life threading itself into the streets. But on the edge of Brookline Avenue, near the cracked pavement beneath the old railway bridge, something had happened that brought even the noise of the city to a strange, uncomfortable pause. A man lay face down beside the curb, his clothes dusty, his arm twisted awkwardly beneath him, and a slow trail of blood creeping from his forehead. He wasn't moving. The air carried a sense of unease, that uneasy whisper of trouble that people notice but pretend they don't. People walked by, quick glances, then quickening steps. Some slowed, shook their heads, murmured something about someone should call an ambulance, and then disappeared into the flow of the day as if the situation itself could swallow them whole. A few held their phones up, not to help, but to record a story they would never tell honestly. A couple of teenagers laughed nervously, unsure of how to act, and retreated. And the man remained on the ground, breathing shallowly, unseen by everyone except the world that continued to spin around him. A woman driving past slowed her car, rolled down her window, and hesitated. Her eyes were soft, compassionate, but she had two small children sitting in the back. She couldn't risk stopping in this part of town. She whispered a quiet prayer and drove on. The world seemed full today, full of people, full of movement, full of excuses. But help wasn't coming, not from them, not yet. 2 miles away, in a part of the city where the rumble of engines was as familiar as the beating of a heart, the Hells Angels were gathering. A dozen Harleys gleamed under the morning light, chrome catching fire in the sun. Leather vests bore the unmistakable Wings skull emblem, and the brothers, tall, rugged, intimidating to those who didn't know them, stood talking in low voices, planning their ride for the day. Their reputation traveled farther than their bikes ever did. People whispered about them, people feared them, people said they were dangerous, reckless, lawless. People said many things, but as always, people rarely knew the full truth. Among the group was Marshall Cobb, Bear, to anyone who had ever ridden with him. A man with a chest like an oak trunk and hands the size of spades. Bear had spent half his life on the road, and the other half trying to outrun the memories he never talked about. He was the kind of man you would notice in any room, not just because of his size, but because of the quiet storm that lived behind his eyes. Next to him was Ryder, thin as a rail but sharp as a blade, always moving, always watching. And behind them, checking his bike with meticulous precision, was Abel, one of the oldest members in the chapter. His beard was a silver curtain that reached his chest, and his voice carried the weight of a man who'd lived enough stories for 10 lifetimes. "Gas run first," a rider asked, tapping the fuel tank with the back of his hand. "Gas run first," Bear said. "Then we take the long route down Brookline." "Why Brookline?" Abel asked with a raised brow. Bear shrugged, fastening the strap on his gloves. "Gut feeling." Abel chuckled. "Your gut feelings are never just gut feelings, brother." Bear didn't answer. He only stared into the horizon where the city rose like a concrete wave. Something was pulling him there, something quiet but insistent. He felt it. He always did. The injured man groaned, shifting slightly, his fingers twitching on the ground. The blood at his hairline had thickened and dried against his skin. A pair of joggers passed him without stopping, pretending, like everyone else, that they didn't see. One young man even stepped over him. Another passerby wrinkled her nose and muttered something about drunks before hurrying on. The cruelty wasn't loud, it was quiet, passive, the kind that wounds the human soul far deeper than an insult ever could. A small boy tugged his mother's sleeve, whispering, "Mama, why is that man sleeping on the road?" She pulled him close and said softly, "Don't look, baby. He shouldn't be our problem. But maybe he should have been. Maybe he needed to be someone's problem. Maybe he needed someone, anyone, just one person to stop." A minute passed, then 5, then 10, cars rolled by, conversations floated past, life continued, and the man faded further into the edges of that life, until the sound came, not the typical city noise. Not footsteps, not chatter, but thunder, deep, rolling, unmistakable mechanical thunder. The sound of Harleys, the Hells Angels were coming. Their engines roared down the street like war drums. People looked up, some in fear, some in annoyance, some with nervous curiosity. The pack moved as one, a river of black leather and chrome, each rider a part of something larger, something powerful, something unspoken. Life paused for them the way it always did. Children pointed. Drivers slowed. Pedestrians stepped aside instinctively. They commanded the road simply by existing on it. Bear led the pack, his enormous frame hunched slightly over the handlebars, his eyes scanning the street with the hyper-awareness of someone who had spent decades watching for danger on every highway in America. As the row of Harleys approached the railway bridge, Bear suddenly stiffened. He saw the man. His right hand shot up in a signal. Engines cut instantly. Brakes screeched lightly. The entire pack stopped, lining up like a wall of steel. People on the sidewalk stared, confused, concerned. No one knew what the bikers were doing, but Bear knew. Before anyone could blink, he parked his bike, kicked the stand out, and jogged toward the man. Ryder and Abel followed immediately. Bear knelt beside the injured stranger, gently rolling him onto his back. "Hey," he said, his voice low but firm. "Hey, brother, can you hear me?" The man groaned. Ryder exhaled sharply. "He's hurt bad. Looks like he got clipped by a car, and nobody bothered to stop." Abel muttered a curse under his breath, one that carried more sorrow than anger. "World's gone cold, brothers, real cold." People began to gather, slowly, cautiously, but none stepped forward to help. They only watched. A woman whispered to her friend, "Are they helping him?" Her friend shrugged, "Maybe, I dunno. They're bikers, hard to tell with them." Another man muttered, "Someone should call 911. Bear shot him a sharp look. "Then do it." Bear snapped, "He ain't waitin'." The man pulled out his phone only because Bear's voice left no room for hesitation. Meanwhile, Bear tore off his leather vest and folded it gently beneath the injured man's head. Ryder checked for a pulse. "It's there," he said, "weak, but there." Bear leaned closer to the man. "Hold on, brother, help's coming." The man blinked slowly, eyes unfocused, whispering something that none of them could understand. Abel placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You're safe now. We got you." Behind them, the rest of the Hells Angels stood guard, forming a protective barrier between the injured man and the world around him. Cars slowed, staring. A few pedestrians drifted closer, curiosity battling with caution. But the angels didn't care who was watching. They only cared about the man lying on the road, and the fact that no one else had bothered to help him. 5 minutes passed, then 10. No ambulance came. Ryder called out to the man who had dialed 911 earlier. "What they say?" "They said they're backed up." The man replied nervously, "Could be 20 minutes. Bear clenched his jaw. 20 minutes was too long. He looked at Abel. Abel looked at Ryder. Ryder looked back at him. They didn't need to speak. They all knew what needed to be done. "Get the truck," Bear ordered. Ryder jumped up. On it, but they didn't have a truck nearby. They had something else, something louder, something heavier, something that people wouldn't expect to see used for saving a life. Bear looked down at the injured man again, his voice gentle despite its gravelly edge. "Brother, we're gonna take you ourselves." The man didn't respond, but his shaky breath made it clear. He was still holding on. Bear nodded once, decisive. "Abel, help me lift him." Abel knelt, "Gently now." They lifted the man carefully, Bear carrying most of the weight, Abel supporting his legs. The rest of the bikers formed a tight ring around them, ensuring no one got too close, ensuring cars didn't come near, ensuring the world did not interfere with what they were doing. They brought the man to Bear's Harley. People gasped, "You can't put him on a motorcycle." Someone shouted, but Bear didn't even look at them. He strapped the injured man securely against his own chest, wrapping thick leather straps around them both, straps meant for securing heavy gear, now being used to hold a fragile human life. Ryder mounted his own bike, ready to flank. Abel mounted his, ready to ride ahead and clear the path. Bear started the engine. The sound was deafening, unmistakable, unstoppable. The rest of the pack mounted their Harleys, engines roaring to life in perfect synchronization, forming a formation tighter than any military unit. People parted instinctively, cars pulled aside, pedestrians moved back. The Hells Angels didn't have flashing lights. They didn't have uniforms, they didn't have authority, but they did have presence. And today, presence was enough. Bear leaned forward slightly over the handlebars, the injured man secured against him. He looked at Ryder, then at Abel, then at the road ahead. Let's move, and they rode. Through every red light, through every intersection, through every hesitation of traffic that dared to get in their way. They rode with purpose. They rode with fire. They rode with the kind of unity that only brothers forged by the road could understand. Cars stopped. People stared. Some filmed, but none blocked their path. The thunder of the engines became a siren of its own, one that the city obeyed without question. They reached Brookline General Hospital in under 4 minutes. Bear braked hard, stopping directly in front of the emergency entrance. The bikers dismounted instantly, rallying around him as he unstrapped the injured man and carried him inside. Doctors rushed over. "What happened?" one asked. "Hit and run," Bear said, breathless. "No one helped him. We brought him." The doctor nodded, motioning to a nurse. "Get him in treatment room 3. Now." Bear lowered the man gently onto the stretcher. As the doctors pushed the man away, the injured stranger's hand weakly gripped Bear's arm. His voice cracked out softly, "Thank you." Bear's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Something human, something raw. Abel exhaled shakily. "He'll make it." Bear nodded. "He will." Hours passed. The bikers waited outside the hospital doors, their long shadows cast across the pavement as the sun dipped lower. Finally, a doctor approached them. "He's stable," the doctor said. "If you hadn't brought him in when you did, he wouldn't have survived." The bikers exchanged glances, not surprised, but relieved. "Can we see him?" Abel asked. "Not yet," the doctor replied, "but when he wakes up, I'll tell him who saved his life." Bear shook his head. "Don't tell him our names. Tell him strangers helped him. That's enough." The doctor hesitated, then nodded with respect. Bear turned to his brothers. "All right, boys, let's ride." But as they walked back to their Harleys, something unexpected happened. People approached them. Quietly, cautiously, a woman held her child close and said, "Thank you for what you did." An elderly man shook Ryder's hand. "This city needs people like you." A teenager, embarrassed, said, I'm sorry I didn't help him. I should have." Bear didn't respond at first. Then he said, "Next time, you will." The crowd fell silent. Then, one by one, people began to nod. It was a small moment, a fragile one, but perhaps it meant something. Bear started his Harley, the engine rumbling like an oath spoken beneath the breath. Before he pulled away, he looked back at the gathered faces. People who had watched, people who had hesitated, people who had learned something today. Kindness ain't weakness, he said quietly, and help don't need a perfect person, just a willing one. With that, the Hells Angels rode off into the setting sun, leaving behind a city that for the first time in a long time felt just a little less cold. And as the engines faded into the horizon, the channel narrator's voice softly filled the scene. "Thank you for watching Kindness Soul Stories. Please like and share my videos, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more true tales of humanity, courage, and unexpected compassion."